Entitled sister alert, one of the biggest entitled sisters of the decade. Guys, when I tell you my sister absolutely was the golden egg child, everything went her way. I'm talking clothes, cars, first boyfriend, she had it all. But when it came to me and Grandpa, we shared this bond that nobody could break, not even her. Well, one day, Grandfather got ill, and things started to take a big turn for the worse, and I'm not talking about the health of Grandpa, I'm talking about me and my sister. I'm mourning. Sorry if I don't introduce myself well. It's just that when you lose someone important in your life, maybe the most important person in it, a lot of things seem to stop making sense. I'll tell you a little more about myself. I've lived with my parents all my life. My parents and my older sister Emma, whom I like to call the devil. I say that because she's just is older. Has lived her whole life believing she's the best being in the world, and that she must be number one in everything. When we were little, she got the best science project in school at the time, and I did it as well during my year, but guess which of the two projects is still sitting on the fridge to brag about? I've always come in second place. And I'm thankful that at least I don't have a younger sister, because I can't imagine being the middle child, neglected, unnoticed. Although my experience is no better. Emma was always given new, pretty clothing, according to what she wanted, but me, well, I was given her leftover clothing when she started to outgrow them. I had to mold myself to her style all my life, even though I did not like such bright clothing. Even when my breast started to grow a few sizes bigger than Emma's, I was forced to wear her bras. So I spent much of my adolescence with chest pain. My parents praised and spoiled her too much. They exposed her to the world as their best creation, and me. They even confused my name with hers, calling me Emma from time to time. Something that has transcended through the family. They don't know how awkward it is to have your relatives get your name wrong, and then pretend it didn't even happen. Well, everyone in the family was like that, except one, my grandfather. Grandpa was an angel, the kindest and most tender person I've ever met. He's one of the few people who truly loved me in my life, for as long as I can remember. Every time we visit him, that is, several times in my childhood since he lived relatively close by, he would get excited and welcome us both with a hug. Do you want to know why I liked him so much? Because he didn't let himself be manipulated by Emma, and I knew that long before I could even read. When we were little girls, I estimated I was about 4 or 5 years old. He welcomed us into his home and bent down to hug us. While Emma was quick and hugged him first, she wanted to stay glued to him to shower him with kisses and make conversation, so he would not say hello to me. And my grandfather, best of the best, said, "Give me a second, honey. I have to say hello to your little sister, too." And not only did he hug me, he took me in his arms and lifted me in the air, almost touching the ceiling and filling me with laughter. That's one of the most fondest memories, because Emma ended up crying that day, saying she did not want to play with Grandpa. It was one of those times when I could be the center of attention. I understood he would not let himself be manipulated by third parties to stop loving his little granddaughter. And so, it was like that for the rest of our lives. Whenever we visited him, he was thrilled to see me, and we would talk for hours at a time. I remember that on one occasion I fought with my mother and decided to leave the house, going to Grandpa's, who not only welcomed me with open doors, but also talked to my mother, advocating for me and making her understand that she was the one who was in bad shape. From that moment on, I knew that this man was my refugee, my best friend, and my greatest ally. Of course, I had my friends in and out of class, but whenever something happened, I always went to Grandpa, because he was all ears for whatever I had to tell him. He always greeted me with hot cocoa with marshmallows, putting a little more in it than Emma's cup. She resented visiting him for not being the center of attention all the time, and I felt bad because Grandpa treated her just well. Maybe not as well as me, but enough to express affection for her. And so, it went for 28 long years until everything began to fall apart when Grandpa became ill. It was very brief, and where cancer began to burn a hole near his shoulder, consuming almost all of his energy, and I visit him from time to time. Ironically, I was one of the least likely to visit him in the family, as I didn't have the stomach to bear seeing him in that condition. Everybody would tell me to go visit him, but even he would tell me, "Don't worry, baby. You go on with your things. I'll be fine for tomorrow." Teardrops came by just remembering him. Well, he passed away on a Friday, right after my workday, and we went to the hospital in tears. Emma was there already, and she was one of the few who was able to talk to him in his last moments. That made me a little upset at first, but now a week later, well, I don't seem to mind as much. My grandfather was a good man, and a better person than his granddaughter. He always supported me in everything more than my parents, and we're close to a will reading scheduled for tomorrow. I plan to start a nice project in his honor, but first I have to do a lot of research on the subject. Besides waiting for tomorrow's news, and my grandfather was a pretty thrifty person, so as bad as it sounds to say, I may get a generous inheritance for myself. Although I would not mind sharing it with Emma, I really would not mind anything at this point. I'd give anything, all my savings or dreams, just to be able to have another afternoon of hot chocolate with my old man. I still miss you, Grandpa. Update number 1. There are many injustices in this world, but I doubt very much of that you readers will ever go through one as huge as mine. I've just arrived at the distribution of my grandfather's estate, and I feel that the man I knew for a lifetime was a complete stranger. Do you know what happened? According to his will, he left equal shares of a small but not very modest fortune he had to his 2 granddaughters. Actually, the assets were passed on to be sold and the money given to us. And while it started as something equitable, half to Emma and half to me, my parents insisted to give most of it to Emma, around 90%. She's been talking about some new business venture that'll increase our earnings. I don't know much about it, but it's beyond unfair that I'm forced to give away almost my entire part of inheritance. It's basically a violation of Grandpa's last will, for goodness sake. At first it seemed illogical, but Emma explained that during Grandpa's last days, she told him about that new business that she had in mind that would guarantee to double her investment in just a few days. And by the end of the year, well, could well be considered the 7-figure sum. Weird thing, he agreed. As she said this, my parents got excited and their eyes sparkled with such a juicy idea. But I thought something was wrong. I mean, those kinds of things are very delicate changes, which I don't think I can be made at the last minute. The lawyer told us that if there was at least one eyewitness who could corroborate Emma's words, they can take it into consideration. Passing over my head. The worst part is that there was a witness, a nurse. A girl named Sora was in charge of taking care of my grandfather during this whole process. They developed a beautiful friendship together with Emma, and that's something that hurts me too much, for not having been part of it. I was too sad to go and visit him, and at this point I cannot be blamed. Anyways, this girl Sora claimed that my grandfather said that so Emma could have almost 90% of the investment. His words were, according to her, "After talking to my eldest granddaughter, I can assure you that she has a solid job and that in the long run, it can pay off for the whole family. If possible, tell my lawyer to modify the will so that everything goes to her, and then give the other granddaughter a fair amount, commensurating with love I have for her." Excuse me? The other granddaughter? And what kind of phrase is, "the amount corresponding to the love I have for her"? You'll excuse me, but that sounds like anyone but my grandpa. He would never say anything so complicated or lacking in sentiment. Still, I rely on the fact that there's no changes allowed to the will post-mortem just because of a few words. And that's when things got complicated. You see, my parents, those two people who were supposed to look after me, talked to Emma and discussed the possibility of filing a lawsuit against me in order to give the majority of the money to her. In a few days, there will be a division of assets, and I decided to talk to my parents one last time. However, I did not count on the fact that they were the most manipulable people in the world, and had fallen for my sister's trickery. My dad said, "You have to understand that Grandpa talked to Emma and he was very good at business. If anyone knew how to turn $1 into 10 in less than 2 days, it was him. And if he had faith in her project, you'd have to trust him more." Instead, my mother, well, she was a little more explicit and less kind and said, "Daughter, I know you have a good relationship with Grandpa, but this kind of thing is delicate. And I'm very sorry to say it, but none of this would have happened if you had visited my father more in his more delicate state." Well, you may have well turned things around, but I hope this serves as a life lesson. Nevertheless, your sister looks like she knows what she's doing, and having Grandpa's blessing, we're guaranteed success. Ultimately, I could not convince my parents, and at this point, I began to feel hatred and loathing for them. The worst part is that I had lost the most important person in my life, and I no longer had support to get me through. It's like I was truly alone in the world. I had not spoken to Emma or the nurse since, although I tried to at the time. I asked her why she was doing this, and she pretended to be oblivious. She only commented the same as my parents, that if it bothered me so much, at least I could have the delicacy to be with him in his last moments. But who can blame me for avoiding that pain? They're basically telling me that I should have suffered to move forward with the project. Well, if that's the case, I'm sorry, but I'd rather be out $1 than have to see the old man suffer. Update number 2, 2 weeks later. Hey guys, so it's been 2 weeks. Since, well, the division of the assets, and Emma's already done her thing. She started a venture that has my parents and the rest of the family in love, although I don't quite understand it. In fact, to this day, I don't quite know what it's all about. It's something about benefits and co-ops, something I've never been a big fan of. He used all of Grandpa's money almost immediately, and I was only left with a small portion that he gave me enough just to upgrade my phone. For a few months now, I've been waiting for a raise at work so I can upgrade my 5-year-old phone. In that sense, well, I can thank my grandfather in a roundabout way. Meanwhile, I have to watch my sister start a new life full of opportunities. I wish I could feel angry, but my posthumous funding is pretty dependent on how financially successful she might become, so I have to wish her the best in the world, even if it's the bitterest pill to swallow. To top it off, next to her is Sora, the nurse, who joined the whole business because, well, although she did not have any part of it, the good friend she made with my grandfather gave her, apparently, enough power to be part of my sister's project. I've been feeling a little down because of how quiet it's been lately, as I no longer have a way to visit Grandpa. The other day, I passed by the cemetery, and it made me very sad to see Grandpa's tombstone. I feel that at some point I have to go visit him, even if it's only metaphorically. For the time being, I decided to repair a little bit of the damage I feel I did not by just visiting him at the time. Maybe it doesn't seem like it, but because of the bad treatment I've been given by the family regarding that, I feel there are some things I haven't been able to make amends about. That is why I will go and pick up his things from the house where he used to live. That would be my goodbye to him. Like closing a cycle, and so I can say goodbye to the one who gave me the best of my life. Gosh, I feel so bad that I couldn't be with him. I even feel that his final thought of giving Emma a chance at the money was not so far-fetched, as she was the one who showed true fidelity. Still, I would like to go through his final resting place and learn more from him, because now that I think about it, I'm coming to a very bitter reflection, and this is what I hardly learned from him in life. He was always attentive to me in my affairs and never expected the same courtesy in return. What if he felt pity for me? That would break my soul, because I really could not bear to know that for years that gentleman was under a huge burden of waiting for his little granddaughter to learn some empathy so that she would hear about him, and that she never ended up paying him back. What's more is, she didn't have the decency to visit him when he was sick. The only thing I knew about him was that he had been in the military for much of his youth, but left to devote himself to the priesthood. But after that, nothing. Maybe I ended up being the real villain in the story, but not by much, as I'll go to fix as much as I can. Update number 3. Before I reveal something big that I discovered, I went to my grandfather's house where there were still some items that would not be sold, which I was to take to another of my family's house in the country. There was all kinds of things there, from collectible baseball cards, black and white photos of great-grandmother. I was looking for anything salvageable, leaving behind a sock without a pair, full of holes and frayed, and put it in the truck. I was accompanied by my friend Lisa, who asked me, "This is thrown away?" And she told me about some papers that were kept in one of the hundreds of drawers in the bedroom. The papers were numbered and appeared to have been written by hand. The first page read, "To Amanda and my beloved granddaughter." Those were his memoirs. My grandfather had written his memoirs, and he had dedicated them to my grandmother and me. Or, well, I assume it was to me, because he singled out the granddaughter. But that was not what surprised me. Not about this whole situation, it was what I read in the last few pages. Let's see. I won't go into the whole story of my grandfather. I can't either, because there are times when I don't understand his handwriting well. Maybe because of his arthritis and because it's a bit private. I don't know if he intended to publish it, and I need to talk to my parents about it. Just to summarize. In the story, he talks lightly about his childhood, which is heartbreaking, as he says that at the point in his life he doesn't remember much about it. His lovers and my mother's upbringing. It got interesting when she started talking about me, saying this and that about her granddaughter, and he never mentions my name, but it's clearly me, describing many of the passages we've experienced throughout our history together. However, things change when she gets to the last few pages. You see, where he starts to reflect on the purpose of the book and the final dedication, perhaps knowing what was about to happen to him. I gather that he did this precisely even when his illness began a few months ago. It went something like this. Lisa helped me transcribe it, and I quote, "I notice how the time of my end is near. It feels surreal, the whole experience. You don't hear anyone say, 'Hey, you're gonna die on such and such day at such and such hour,' very often. But, hey, it's my turn, like so many others before me, and what was left for me to do? I guess nothing. I can't even be in the position of being remorseful or making amends for my mistakes, because I know I didn't make them. And everything bad I did I already worked out long ago. I also have the goodness to walk away with clean hands and clear conscience, mind you. And not only that, but I'll be able to leave through the wide door knowing that I helped my best legacy, my little one." Clarification. Throughout the text he mentions his granddaughter. That is me as his little one. So the reference to me was clear, and I quote you, "Giving her the little big push that she needs. She hasn't visited me in a long time. Almost since I fell into bed, but not only can't I not blame her, I applaud her decision. I don't want a young girl to have to watch her elderly dying grandfather waiting for the final ring-a-ding. At least I know that with this she'll understand that I respect her decision and wish her well. But first I share with you, my friends here listening, my plan. I've amassed a small fortune that I plan to direct to my granddaughter so that I can lighten the burden of her day-to-day life. I was going to divide it equally between her and her sister, but my decision was radically changed by several factors. One of them is that her sister, who has been visiting me much, well, overmuch, just to gain some sort of favoritism, which she'll get in reverse. She has insisted that the money I allocate for both of them be almost exclusively for her, and it's the biggest sign that she does not deserve it. Between you and me, that girl has had a lifelong knack for manipulation worthy of an 80s con artist. My daughter fell for the game, and so did her husband. I will not encourage this kind of behavior, so she... blah, blah, blah. Grandpa was explaining that Emma did not deserve the money, and when I saw the date of the last update, it was only a couple days before his departure from this world. So it doesn't match Emma or Sora's statements, which said that grandfather had left her the inheritance a week before. Well, this writing was proof enough that Emma had indeed lied. And even if she had alleged a witness, which is something that should be investigated as well, her word would be worthless against an official statement of the deceased. On Lisa's recommendation, I took a picture of every single page. My phone's bursting at the seams because there were almost 200 pages, but it's better to make sure before something else happens. The next thing is to seek assistance from the lawyers so they can help us gather more information so I can get what I deserve. I know this situation feels horrible, as it is putting me against my sister for basically money, but I see it more in a sense of not tarnishing my grandfather's last will and doing him justice where justice is due. Update number 4. Have you ever had that feeling? Guys, have you ever had that feeling that there's no way this could ever happen to you? Well, I have. And I feel that I caused a greater evil to my family by seeking justice. I was researching my grandfather's case where the inheritance he was to leave would be divided equally, but then taking most of it to me at the risk of angering my sister Emma, which it did. But with the help of my grandfather's direct text messages, the lawyers and I were able to have enough basis to formally ask Emma for an explanation. She dodged the issues and all at once played the victim, claiming more that it was a family matter, rather than saying that she was true. She kept harping on the nurse issue, but the letters I showed pointed to the contrary. My parents, strangely enough, sided with Emma, knowing that I had the upper hand, and my mother was even able to confirm my grandfather's handwriting on the text, as if to corroborate that it was legitimate. It escalated to the one point where Emma decided to sue for defamation. When I saw the notice, oh boy, I was shocked, as she was now actively fighting for the money. That's when I decided to let the war begin. But it's worse for her, as after a few sessions, the jury decided to appeal in my favor, and not only that, but they agreed with my counterclaim, and that's right, I decided to countersue her for certain, rather capital things. Turns out that, as a part of my grandfather's investigation, my lawyer told me to look for whereabouts of the money Emma's used, in case she had to replace it, so Lisa and I set about it. It turns out that, well, Emmy, the money she used was only to fund some sort of Ponzi schemes, in which she was including more and more people. When I found out, I was upset. I did not hesitate to tell my parents, who indirectly had been part of the scheme, in which Emma had told them to participate, making them believe that they would triple their income by the end of the year. She had the evidence of not only that, but some witnesses, as she had already started the seasons of deceptions coming to light, with several people claiming not to see results in Emma's promises. Ponzi schemes are quite delicate, so move one card and the whole house collapses. I used this to my advantage in meetings. Where the judges heard about this, he was outraged as well, both for misusing my grandfather's illegitimate money and for being part of a Ponzi scheme years before. Well, I later learned. What a happy coincidence. This upset the whole family, as Emma was filing criminal charges for class fraud. I'd say the craziest part of the matter is that she was sure that everything was legitimate, and that my grandfather has indeed said, for the alteration of the will relying on the testimony of the nurse. Here's the truth, though. Sora is very passive in front of the whole situation, moving just when Emma tells her. This worries me a little, if I'm honest, because I feel that something strange is going on between the two of them. And to top it all off, the family is even more divided. So much so that even my great-uncles and aunts, whom I haven't seen in years, are on my side. Unlike my parents, who take very dim views of this counter-suit against sister. Even though she's the one who started the whole thing. I even sound like those old sibling fights with the quote, "she started it," "no, she started it" thing. This has escalated to the point where a friend of mine told me that it could be in the newspapers, which I would not want, as it would be publicly humiliating my sister. Update number 5. This is the final update posted by OP. Hey guys, here's an update. I mean, the conclusion of the story is quite satisfactory, or at least I think so, because it was taken to an extreme that almost broke the family. In the end, Emma was brought to justice because of her deception. It fell apart thanks to the person who helped her from the beginning, Sora. The nurse was interviewed to exhaustion by the hospital management, who had to apply some psychological tricks to break the girl, because within days she was confessing to what we all suspected. Oh, Emma. Emma visited grandfather, it's true, and on a few occasions I saw them together calmly, without discussing something about money. I know, I shouldn't say that sort of thing as they were family situations, but the sight of the poor gentleman being harassed by Emma, well, that's just too much to bear. However, when the practice of arguing was transcending, Emma began to talk to me about a new project she was considering creating, a venture of sorts, that I was assured I could have a success in the recent future. I guess it was the same stale scheme she kept promoting to others, only with me it was different. She said, and I quote you, she told me about her grandfather's situation, and in tears she explained how all her life she had been treated badly by him, even though she was the one to go see him and cared about him every day. Well, I admit that she did not talk about her sister, but she told me that she would receive most of the inheritance, that, well, he would be willing to distribute them and share. In itself, the girl explained, oh Sora, how Emma seduced her into failing at the game, falling right into her trap, even asking her to lie in the modification of the will, something that could be considered illegal. Sora felt bad from the first moment and thought that was the profits from the new business. She'd get over it, but it was quite the opposite because she started with remorseful events. According to her, it was eating her up for days. When she confessed and told this to Emma, things did not go well. Emma got angry, very angry, insulting Sora and telling her that she would rot in prison for having betrayed her. Unfortunately, as a result of the whole situation, Sora would end up paying a sentence as well. Although, it might as well been a house arrest due to her good record inside the hospital. It was a bitter outcome for the girl, but she brought it upon herself for having fallen into my sister's games. The family's devastated, because now everybody's looking down on my parents, the ones who allowed Emma to do everything. Why do I say this story is so satisfying, though? Because the other day, see, I was talking to my aunt and uncle, and they told me they scolded my parents for all the spoiling that they gave. Well, all that spoiling for Emma throughout the years, praising me for keeping my composure and respect for my grandfather. About Emma, unfortunately, she will pay 2 years of her life locked away inside of a jail cell, being that many other people sued her for the pyramid scheme she did. Plot twist. It's time for that plot twist. She was about to leave the country once her plan was succeeded. They wanted more jail time for her, but in the end, that was a sentence, and that's it. As for me, well, I was repaid in full directly from Emma's savings, and I'm just now making a goal plan for how I can invest. The last thing I knew about her was not quite too gentle for me. She now has this resentment against me for, quote, always having Grandpa's attention. Excuse me, she's the one who had the world in the palm of her hand, and being jealous of my one happy corner is too despicable for her. I sometimes go to my grandfather's grave just to visit him. I've only done it twice so far, but it's felt quite liberating. I don't know about talking to him. I may feel strange doing it, but one way or another we communicate, and I tell him he doesn't have to worry about anything anymore. I'm talking to my aunt and uncle about whether to have Grandpa's texts edited. My parents aren't part of that conversation. In fact, they no longer have a say in my family decision. I would love to hear from my mother to be included in the project, only for me to tell her that she must have thought of that when she supported Emma and her shenanigans. Great comeback. That way, we would honor his legacy and show it to the world. He always loved me, and I know he did until the last of his days, and until my time comes. Every day I will thank him for being my anchor, my support, my best friend. The fact alone that this was about a stolen inheritance, I don't think OP could possibly be the a-hole. A lot of the commenters in the original post were saying, hey, what you're doing, OP, is not wrong. You're entitled to this because your grandfather wanted you to have this. But there were also some people saying, hey, OP, you're going a bit too far exposing all this and potentially getting her thrown into prison. Well, we know how the story ended up, guys. So I ask you this one question. We're caught up between going to this side or going to this side. Which side are you jumping on? Are you with OP or are you against OP? In my opinion, I think OP deserved the inheritance because it was rightfully hers and grandfather wanted her to have it. So therefore, I say, OP, you are not the a-hole and you're justified. But do drop your opinions. Let's talk about it in the comment section. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito. If you're new to the channel, I post videos every single day. I try to find some dramatic videos all across the World Wide Web, and then I scour the web for the updates, compile them all together, and present them for you guys. So if you do want to support me, all you have to do is subscribe. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see ya.